interested in change. After that video on innovative change, it only makes sense that next we have Alex T. Smith, Dayton Regional STEM's own lion, talking about political change.
Howdy. My name is Alex T. Smith, and I'm a senior at the Dayton Regional STEM School. But don't let the beard fool you. I'm only 17 years old. Although I might look like I've been held back a couple of years, I promise I haven't been. See, I come from a long line of Appalachian Americans, and my family is largely proud of its Southern heritage. So addressing anyone who has any form of culture is a really big deal to me. So I'd like to thank you for this opportunity today. See, during their free time, a lot of teenagers nowadays play video games or go to the mall. Not me. I raise chickens and grow potatoes. My idea of the best day ever would be backcountry camping, chopping firewood with a Bowie knife, and then cooking a down-home Dutch oven meal. But believe it or not, this isn't what my speech is about. My speech is actually about being involved in the political process. So why am I telling you any of this? I mean, good Lord, what does any of that have to do with being involved in politics? Well, I'd argue that it has both nothing and everything to do with it. Although my, for lack of a better term, redneckedness has no direct effect on my ability to be involved in the political process, then information about my identity still serves to prove that I'm not the type of person that you'd expect to be interested in politics in the first place. I mean, those who know me well know that it's certainly not that I'm unintelligent or unskilled. In fact, they know it's quite the opposite. But come on, based on my personality and my upbringing, you wouldn't expect me to be up here giving you a speech on this topic. And you'd be right. I have no political aspirations. I myself have no interest in being a career politician. In fact, my interest lies in wildlife management, as if you couldn't already tell from my rugged mountain man exterior. See, all this goes to show that when it comes to being involved in the political process, I'm no more skilled than the average person. In fact, you could make the argument that when it comes to the political process, I'm relatively unspectacular. So when I give this talk to you today, don't think of me as some elite career politician in training. Instead, remember my personality and realize that when it comes to being a part of the political process, if I can do it, you can definitely do it too. Now, before I explain any further, I'd like to switch topics and talk to you about public restrooms. To illustrate my next point, I'm going to conduct an interactive poll. So please take a moment and think about how frequently you use a public restroom, or in other words, a restroom that's not located within someone's home during an average week. This might take you a little while, especially if this is the very first time you've taken to consider it. Alrighty, please raise your hand to show me how many of you use a public restroom at least once a week. All right. Please keep your hands raised to show me how many of you use a public restroom at least 2 times a week or more. How about 3 or more? 5 or more? Is there anyone in the audience that would feel comfortable saying that when it evens out, they probably use a public restroom once for every day of the week? Oh, good Lord, I even saw some hands go up higher on that one. All right, you can put your hands down, but bear with me, and please reflect on the following prompts individually. Have you ever been someplace where you've needed to use a restroom, but there hasn't been one? And if that applies to you, how did that experience make you feel? But let's not just stop there, let's take it a step further. Imagine you required assistance using the restroom. Imagine you needed adult diapers in a safe, flat area for an adult caregiver to change you in whenever you need to relieve yourself. Imagine being out in public in that place that you and your family frequently visit and suddenly having to drop what you're doing and go home simply because you don't have the luxury of using a public restroom whenever you need to. Take a moment and let it sink in that to some people, this isn't just a hypothetical situation. And in fact, there are many people in our state, most of which you've never even met, who don't have to think very hard to imagine those scenarios because they live it. See, the real story of how I became involved in the political process starts with the Hilton family. This is Miss Hilton, and she was the intervention specialist at the Dayton Regional STEM School. But more importantly, for the purpose of my speech, she's the proud mother of a young boy named Matthew. Matthew is 15 years old, and ever since he was born, he suffered from a developmental disability, which has kept him confined to that wheelchair and unable to use the restroom and do many other things on his own. But see, the Hiltons have always been an active and outgoing family, So when Matthew was born, they vowed that they would not allow Matthew's disabilities to keep them from doing the things that they had always done together as a family. But other than his disabilities, Matthew is an average 15-year-old boy, meaning that he weighs over 120 pounds, which, as you can imagine, makes petite little Miss Hilton have a very hard time changing Matthew, especially when the family's out in public. Since public restrooms don't have a designated space for adult diapers to be changed in, Miss Hilton is often forced to change Matthew in the floor of the family van. When Matthew's changed in there, he's exposed to all the elements and the view of passing onlookers, which as a teenager leaves him no room for his dignity. When it rains, Matthew has no choice but to return to a soggy wheelchair, and in the harsh winter months, his bare skin is exposed to frigid temperatures, which is extremely uncomfortable for him, since the cold is his least favorite sensation. So all these reasons and many more, much too numerous to list in this speech, is all why it's becoming increasingly difficult for the Hilton family to live up to their promise to not withdraw from the community because of Matthew's disabilities. Now, ladies and gentlemen, if it's not already apparent, the Hilton family's experience is one that's very, very personal to me. But when it gets down to it, their experience is not entirely unique. Because there are many people and families all over the United States who suffer from conditions like muscular dystrophy, cerebral palsy, spina bifida, autism, paraplegics, quadriplegics, stroke victims, elderly citizens, and even some of our wounded warriors are all just a few examples of people whose experiences mirror that of the Hilton family. Now, like I said, I ain't a politician, but I got involved with the political process through my love of the Hilton family and those whose experiences are like theirs, and my passion to help improve their accessibility to public restrooms. Now, when I say the political process, I don't just mean voting. What I really want to focus on for this speech is being able to contact a representative to ask them to write or sponsor a bill, or to support some kind of a cause in the form of legislation. After all, you may remember from your high school government class, and that all too infamous Schoolhouse Rock video that we all know and love, that a bill starts out as an idea. In fact, many of the ideas that go into bills come from ordinary people like you and I. See, as a part of a school project, I became involved in the support of passing a bill through the Ohio Senate. And through that experience, I learned about how much of an important role ordinary people can play in the process by which a bill becomes a law. And more importantly, I learned about how much the weight of the actions of just one person can have on improving the way our society works. Now, this is my high school government class. As a part of that school project, we wrote a bill for the Ohio Senate on behalf of the Hilton family. This project became known as the Matthews Bill Project, named after Matthew, who was, of course, the inspiration for our bill. But see, since its beginning, the Matthews Bill Project has had a history of being student-led, which means that that group of 16 to 18-year-olds were all the driving force behind Senate Bill 112. We wrote this bill, we contacted a senator to sponsor it, and we've continued to advocate for its passing ever since. So the most important thing I learned as I became involved in the political process is that all people, no matter how smart or privileged they are, have the ability to enact political change and to make a difference in the community. And that's exactly what we did. Before writing Matthew's bill, that government class had to meet with Ms. Hilton and other people who have disabilities in our community to figure out what kind of an accommodation would meet their needs. And after extensive research into possible solutions to their problem, we decided upon a bill that would require all high-traffic public facilities built or renovated after January 1st, 2017, to have a family restroom with at least one adult changing station. Now, for those of you in the audience who the word adult changing station is not one you're familiar with, I'll try to explain as best I can in the time I've allotted. So this is a diagram of an adult changing station. You can see it looks remarkably similar to those folding wall tables that you see in some restrooms set up for infants, except that they're large enough to accommodate the weight of an adult. This is a picture of what an adult changing station would look like if it were integrated into an average family restroom. This should allow Matthew and thousands of other people in our state to finally have access to public restrooms, and it would no longer force them to leave the community whenever they have to relieve themselves. See, to many of you in the audience today, this is an issue that you're thinking about for the very first time. Public restrooms are so abundant that the average person doesn't even give them a second thought until they need one. Many of us see public restrooms as something that is a right rather than as a privilege. And most of us can't even imagine that something as uncontrollable to us as using the restroom could be something that could run our life in such a way. See, to me, the fact that in the year 2015 that thousands of people in our state still don't have access to public restrooms and are barred from our community on account of it is something that should appall each and every one of us on a very deep and personal level. I mean, after all, that's why public restrooms were invented in the first place. Ladies and gentlemen, can you imagine if we had to spend so much time trying to figure out where we could use the restroom next when out in public, it would take many of us so much longer to travel or even make simple trips within our community. I think perhaps the most compelling proof that anyone has the ability to make a difference is that I, being one of the most unlikeliest of people, had the privilege of testifying in support of our bill during an Ohio Senate subcommittee hearing. So this meant that as a teenager, I had to get dressed up and have a speech prepared to give to a panel of senators, which, you can agree with me, would be a daunting task for the average person, doubly so to someone like me. See, it wasn't that I was unfamiliar with public speaking. In fact, this certainly wasn't even my first major public speaking event, but this was an entirely different animal. I knew I had to do this because of the passion that stirred within me for our bill. But don't get me wrong, that never changed the fact for a second that I was absolutely terrified to do so. But luckily for me, before my testimony, we did a lot of research into each member of the committee. In fact, our research was so thorough that many of my classmates joked that they had no idea that there was that much stalking involved in passing a bill. But see, a funny thing happened, ladies and gentlemen. As we began piecing together a file on each member of the committee, we realized that they were actually some pretty normal people. I mean, a lot of them had children that were around our age. Many of them were in church or other community organizations that a lot of us were in. Many of them grew up in communities or cities that were similar to the ones that we were living in now. And see, after that, they didn't seem so scary or distant to me. And that was largely why I felt so relaxed to speak in front of them. See, this all goes to show that you don't have to be special or born into a politically active family to approach a politician about an issue that you're passionate about. After all, they're people just like you and me. They have families, fears, secrets, ambitions, and insecurities, just like everyone here tonight. See, this is why it's so important to be involved in the political process. I understand that I will never truly comprehend what it is like to be Matthew, or even a member of the Hilton family. But by being involved in the political process, I've been able to learn about their experiences and to be an active part of the solution. If there's anything that you take with you home after hearing my talk tonight, let it be this. Is there some issue that you know about that requires political change? Is there something that you or someone you know struggles with unfairly in our society and suffers because of it? Well, let me remind you, if a group of high school students, and even one simple redneck like myself, can write a bill, contact a senator to sponsor it, and even testify in front of a Senate subcommittee, then that is inescapable proof that political change is something that is achievable by all people. Now, if any of you have any questions about how you can become further involved in the political process or about how you can support Senate Bill 112, please see me after the program. But until then, thank you so much for this opportunity, and you have a blessed and happy day. Thank you.